All right, let's go live to the Munich Security Conference now, where the German Chancellor, Friedrich Merz, is speaking.
Freedom of speech here ends where the words spoken are directed against human dignity and our basic law. We do not believe in tariffs and protectionism, but in free trade. We stick to climate agreements and the World Health Organization because we are convinced. Because we're convinced that global challenges can only be solved together. Now, the transatlantic partnership is no longer something we can just take for granted. First, it started in the United States, then here in Europe, but probably also here in this room. Ladies and gentlemen, if our partner is to have a future, we need to forge it and reason it in a new way. This reasoning must be hands-on and not esoteric. We need to realize on both sides of the Atlantic that we are stronger together. We Europeans know how precious the trust is on which NATO was founded. In an age of superpowers, also the US will rely on this trust. Even the US is reaching the limits of its own power if it goes it alone. The strategists at the Pentagon are very aware of this. NATO is not just our, but also, dear American friends, your competitive advantage.
Let me paraphrase this for our American friends in English. For 3 generations, trust amongst allies, partners and friends has made NATO the strongest alliance of all times. Europe knows deeply how precious this is. In the era of great power rivalry, even the United States will not be powerful enough to go it alone. Dear friends, being a part of NATO is not only Europe's competitive advantage, it's also the United States' competitive advantage. So let's repair and revive transatlantic trust together. We, the Europeans, we are doing our part.
And I would like to say a few words about what Wolfgang Ischinger said before. Autocracies may have loyal followers, but democracies have partners and allies. And this sentence is also relevant for us Europeans. A true ally takes his obligations seriously. No one forced us into this excessive dependency on the United States, in which we have found ourselves recently. This dependence was self-inflicted, but we now cast off this state as soon as we can. And we are doing this not by writing off NATO. We're doing it by establishing a strong, self-sustained European pillar within the alliance. It's in our own interest. And ladies and gentlemen, this approach is absolutely right. It is right if the United States further alienates itself. It is right as long as we cannot guarantee our security by ourselves. And it is also right in order to forge a healthier transatlantic partnership. I suppose that we may have differing opinions more often than in the past. We will negotiate about the right way forward and maybe have to argue about it. But if we do this with new strength, new respect and self-respect, it will be to the benefit of both sides. And by the way, I could feel something of this spirit in the talks we had about Greenland over the recent weeks. And Mette Frederiksen, the Danish Prime Minister, can confirm this. She knows that she can rely on European solidarity. There is no a limitation to that. Fourthly, and last but not least, we are forging a strong network of global partnerships. As important as European integration and the transatlantic partnership remain for us, they will no longer be sufficient to preserve our freedom. Partnership is not an absolute term here. It doesn't require full convergence of all values and interests. This is one of the lessons we've learned these days, by the way. These days and weeks and months. So we reach out to new partners with whom we share not all, but many objectives. This avoids dependencies and risks, and at the same time, it opens up new opportunities for both sides. It protects our freedom. Canada and Japan, Turkey, India or Brazil will play a key role in this, as do South Africa, the Gulf states and others. We want to work more closely together with these states on the basis of mutual respect and with stamina and determination. We share the fundamental interest in a political order in which we can rely on agreements made, in which we are able to solve global problems together, and in which we, first and foremost, resolve conflicts peacefully together. We share the experience that the international law and international organizations serve our sovereignty, our independence, and particularly our freedom. We Germans know a world in which might makes right would be a dark place. Our country has gone down this path in the 20th century until the bitter and dreadful end. Today, we embark on a different, a better path. Our biggest strength remains the ability to forge partnerships, alliances, and organizations based on the law and on rules anchored in respect and trust, and that believe in the power of freedom. After 1945, it was mostly the United States, our friends in the United States, that sparked our enthusiasm for this bright idea here in Germany. We will never forget that. On this foundation, NATO became the strongest political alliance in history. We remain faithful to this idea, with all our power and passion, with decency and solidarity, with creativity and courage. We carry this idea into this new age for a future that is not dark, ladies and gentlemen, but bright, a great time for us, but especially for the generations of our children and grandchildren, who rely on us in these weeks and months to do the right thing. And we are determined to do that.
The German Chancellor Friedrich Merz addressing the Munich Security Conference, repair and rebuild transatlantic trust. He said, let's bring in our diplomatic editor, James Bayes, who's covering the conference, joins us now from Munich. So, James, we remember all too well a year ago, J.D. Vance giving it both barrels to Europe, being very critical of European security. You could almost argue that this was a European response.
Yes, I think a year ago, Europe realised, even though it had passed successfully through 4 years of the first Trump administration, that this was going to be different, and that the US's relationship with Europe, the transatlantic relationship, this particular event here, the Munich Security Conference, has gone on since 1963, and it's always been a quite cosy event. Well, last year that was completely shaken up, and now I think you are getting Europe's response. The German Chancellor there saying they know what a world where might is right is like, and it's not a good thing, referring to Germany's role in World War II and Nazi Germany. But he says open conflict is changing the world, and the rules-based order has ended. Interesting that he went into English when he said the importance of NATO was still there and the US must work very closely with Europe on NATO. I think that's the soundbite they want the US television networks to use. But real questions about the transatlantic alliance here at this Munich Security Conference. And as I said, a barometer, this event every year. What was once a very positive and cosy relationship with real doubts now after that J.D. Vance speech, after the debates over tariffs, over Ukraine and the controversy over Greenland more recently. Where does all this stand? That's a question I put a short time ago to Poland's Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister.
Well, we have a good US delegation. Secretary Colby, who made a speech yesterday, I saw him this morning. Secretary Rubio is coming with a major speech. So clearly the US is still interested in talking to allies.
Since last year, people have referred it to me as the Munich moment. J.D. Vance coming here, shaking things up, shocking European leaders, European opinion formers. And since then, of course, you've had tariffs, you've had Greenland, you've had disputes over Ukraine, you've had a NATO summit where there were certainly before the NATO summits, all sorts of disagreements on the funding of NATO. This has been a pretty tricky year, has it not?
Sure, but we've had these Munich moments before. You know, I was here in the room when Joschka Fischer, just before the invasion of Iraq, told Secretary of Defense Rumsfeld, "I am not convinced." We also had the speech by Vladimir Putin when he announced his aggressive neo-colonial policy, and people didn't quite believe that this was in earnest, and we now know that it was. A few years ago, Lavrov told the Germans, "You be careful," because there was no referendum before the unification of Germany.
Well, on to clear and present issues, James. We're getting word of talks perhaps between Ukraine and Russia next week in Switzerland.
Yes, I mean, that seems to have been confirmed now by both the Russian and the Ukrainian side. Geneva, 17th and 18th of February, the next round of these US-brokered talks. President Zelensky is here in Munich trying to get further support from European allies because his war effort is now entirely funded by Europe. But of course, the diplomatic effort, that is down to the US. They are the ones who are mediating these discussions between Ukraine and Russia, and obviously there is concern here, I think, among the European allies and the Ukrainians of whether Russia really wants peace or whether Russia would prefer delay rather than diplomacy.
And that is only one of the ongoing challenges. We're also looking at Iran and indeed Gaza.
Yes, absolutely. Those are also efforts, and efforts very much led by the Trump administration. You have further Iran talks expected. Again, we haven't had a date and a location yet for those, but we're expecting that soon. And some talk that those Iran talks could be next week as well. Somewhat complicating the calculations is, of course, that on the US side, it's the same participants need to be involved in these negotiations. But those absolutely crucial. And on Gaza, the US plan for Gaza, the border peace is meeting in Washington, D.C. on the 19th. That will be important. But parts of the Trump plan aren't in place yet. Hamas was supposed to disarm an international grouping, an international coalition was supposed to come in on the ground to support the peace effort. Those parts of the plan, they haven't happened yet.
All right, James, back with you as things develop there. James Bay speaking to us there from the Munich Security Conference. Thank you. Also joining us from Munich now is Jonathan Barth. He's a senior fellow at the Jacques Delors Institute in Paris. Jonathan, great to have you with us to assess what's going on, what we've already heard, because the German Chancellor Friedrich Merz has earlier said that Europe will only be able to implement its ideas if they learn to speak the language of power politics. And we're certainly seeing the German Chancellor Friedrich Merz laying it on the line. China reinterpreting the international order. He said, US leadership disputed, squandered. We can protect our interests and values if we trust our own strengths.
Yeah, I think he is making an important point here, because so far the Europeans have been very reluctant in actually really speaking the language of power. We have seen, obviously, the strong push when it comes to military, the armament, to defense. And I mean, we in the program it was already talked about also the European pillar inside NATO, right? But power today also means other things, right? So when we think of China, it's particularly the dependency on rare earth materials. When we think of the US, it's not only their security guarantee, but it's also their energy supply when it comes to LNG. Yeah, and so speaking the language of power also means, this is why I'm glad that Mertz also pointed at this, to partner up with other countries in this role, because we are increasingly finding Europe on a playing ground that is dominated by bullies, right? And Europe needs to build partnerships. It needs to team up with others to make sure that the bullies are not, taking over everything, but protect this space of sanity.
Okay, so Friedrich Merz talking strong. The US Secretary of State Marco Rubio, he's in town as well. We'll be hearing from him at some point. And it was pertinent, I thought, interesting to note that one of his first meetings was with the Chinese delegation.
So, sorry, I had trouble understanding you. The line is not great.
No, I was just saying that the US Secretary of State Marco Rubio, he's in town as well. He will be speaking at some point during the conference. And it was interesting to see that one of his first meetings was with the Chinese delegation. Yeah,
I mean, we obviously see, everyone is trying to keep all channels warm, right? I think it's interesting to see that they have this time sent Rubio and not J.D. Vance, because J.D. Vance is supposed to be the bigger disruptor, so we expect a less disruptive speech from Rubio, but let's see what he delivers, because so far the US has continued to surprise Europe. The big question really is whether, whether Rubio is, for example, responding to what Mertz has said. How will he think of also strengthening the European pillar?
Okay, yeah, well, we'll keep a close eye on that as and when it happens. In the meantime, appreciate your contribution. Jonathan Barth speaking to us there from Paris. Thank you.